Hey there, everybody. This is Javier here coming to you live. I hope everybody's doing well tonight. I was doing some thinking today, and as always, because you always know that I'm a very, very, very deep thinker. I was doing some thinking, and I wanted to do a video reaffirming my political independence. Well, I also wanted to say that I'm starting to feel like some of my views are, maybe a lot of my views, some of my views are being directed by a higher power. In other words, God. And I wanted to talk a little bit about why. And in this video, there's multiple topics I do want to get into, starting with topics related to Israel and things like that. And just in general, topics that I, for some reason, have been really, really solid on for a long time and unwavering and unchanging on. And I also wanted to kind of to dive into the question, psychological and even spiritual, as to why I'm so solid on the topics that I'm solid on. So this is going to be a little bit of an interesting video. And as most of you know me, hopefully by now, that I'm very much center-left, obviously. I'm very much center-left on the majority of my viewpoints. And I very much support Democrats over Republicans overall, even though it used to be very much reversed in the past for me. Now, at the same time, it's also no secret that I hold some conservative viewpoints. I continue to hold some conservative viewpoints to this very day and second. Conservative viewpoints particularly and related to Jews, Israel, and Jews, Israel, abortion, 10 Commandments in schools, etc. And that's been no secret. And a few other things, maybe at least one other thing too, which I'm going to talk a little bit about later, which I intend to talk a little bit about later in this video. But before I do, I want to emphasize that I'm going to be getting into a few different topics in this video. And to start off, I want to talk a little bit about a post that I made. A post that I made earlier that I entitled Full Statement. And this post, in a nutshell, along with a few other topics I plan to get into, seem to, do, in fact, reaffirm my strong political independence, despite being center-left. And it's constant that I question myself. Like, am I officially a Democrat now? Am I officially a Democrat now? Am I officially a Democrat now? And it's just like I can almost never say yes because there's still X, Y, and Z that I disagree with and that I still do hold conservative views on. I wanted to discuss this and also kind of discuss how I feel like a lot of my viewpoints are being directed by a higher power, in other words, God. So I'm going to read my statement that I posted earlier and we're going to discuss it, and then I'm going to move on to a few other topics. So I posted this to Facebook earlier. Full statement. As someone whose beliefs are very much center-left, I'm very surprised to say that I've been standing with Trump a lot more than I thought. Not against Democrats in most cases. And I want to stop there for a second. Not against Democrats in most cases, because I recognize that most MAGA right-wing Republicans, they demonize Democrats. They demonize the Democratic Party. I do not do that. I don't want to do that because I very much support the Democrats on many, many, many issues. But I've been surprised to say, as someone who's very much center-left, I've been surprised to say that I've been standing with Trump a lot more than I thought. Not against Democrats in most cases, but very much so against the far harder right, anti-Israel, anti-Jew, Tucker Carlson, Nick Fuentes-loving, Groyper factions of his own party. Hate has no place in our country against any group, including Jewish people. I'm against racism. I'm against misogyny. I'm against homophobia. I'm against transphobia too. I'm against xenophobia. I'm against all that stuff, and I'm against anti-Semitism. All of them are on the same plate for me to be against. So hate has no place in our country against any group, including Jewish people. And this is, just want to emphasize one thing. This is one problem that I have with the Zionist right and the hard pro-Israel Republican side. One problem I have with them, it's this. It's their hypocrisy. And a friend of mine pointed this out, and rightfully pointed this out. They will condemn hatred toward Jews, Ben Shapiro and Mark Levin and whatever, these pro-Zionist Republicans, Reverend Jordan, whatever, that black conservative reverend that keeps posting on Facebook, who's kind of funny actually. They're against hatred of Jews, but they don't call it hatred against others. A lot of them, they'll call it racism because that's an obvious one, but they don't call it homophobia, they don't call it xenophobia, they don't call it transphobia, they don't call it misogyny. They embrace some of those viewpoints. They don't call out anti-LGBT hatred. They embrace that. But when it's Jews or when it's racism, or some of them, especially black conservatives, when it's Jews or racism, those are the untouchable, but you can hate anybody else. Whereas liberals, which I agree with more, they call it all forms of hatred. They're supposed to, at least. Now, unfortunately, with the liberals, there is a gray area when it comes to anti-Semitism in a lot of cases, and that's a problem. So this is something that it seems to me like a lot of conservatives, a lot of traditional conservatives and Republicans, they will scream about anti-Semitism, they will call it anti-Semitism all day, rightfully so, while hating all these other groups of people. And whereas the left, they're going to defend these other groups of people, but they pretend to call it anti-Semitism, but there's a gray area because a lot of the far left are very anti-Jew. A lot of the far left are very anti-Semitic, and that's just a truth. That is true. That is a fact. So if I can't stand with the anti-Semitic far left, and in this particular issue, I will stand with the traditional conservatives who are against and opposed to anti-Semitism. Whereas I am going to stand with the traditional left in opposition to all these other forms of bigotry that traditional conservatives seem to overlook and not care about and even embrace, and are hypocrites about, just flat out, straight up. So again, hate has no place in our country against any group, including Jewish people. And the truth is this: the people that hate Israel and that hate Jews generally hate everyone else also. A lot of them are racist. A lot of them are xenophobic, very xenophobic. Even though they pretend to stand with Muslims, they don't really care about them. A lot of them are racist. A lot of them are xenophobic. A lot of them are pro-misogyny. Nick Fuentes is very pro-misogyny. A lot of them are anti-woman. A lot of them are anti-gay, homophobic, anti-LGBT, and all the above. And that's just the truth. That's just the truth. So a lot of the people that hate Israel, a lot of the people on the far right, on the hard right, that hate Israel, that hate Jews, are also, a lot of people on the hard right that hate Israel and that hate Jews are also racist, misogynistic, homophobic, xenophobic, and hold all kinds of forms of bigotry in other ways. And that's just the truth. And then I go on to give examples. The people that hate Israel and they hate Jews generally hate everyone else too. That's true. And I give examples. Look at Hitler. Look at Nick Fuentes. Look at Tucker Carlson. Look at Kanye West. Look at the massive young Gen Z, mostly men crowds that follow them. Look at Candace Owens. Yeah, I know. Now Candace Owens, I have a little bit of I have a gray area for her because I support her on the Turning Point USA stuff. Like, she's calling out Turning Point USA rightfully. And by the way, the Unf America tour is going to do a documentary exposing Turning Point USA too. So I think the more we continue to speak out against Turning Point USA and counter them, we'd have a shot against, taking back their culture war. But that's a different subject. Aside from that, showing the examples like Fuentes, Carlson, Kanye West, Candace Owens, all these people, they hate Israel, they hate Jews, they hate gay people. A lot of them are misogynistic, especially Fuentes. A lot of them hold, very xenophobic viewpoints. A lot of them are white nationalists, like Nick Fuentes. A lot of them want ethnic cleansing. and to deport and mass deportations and deport everybody that is not like them. No more immigration. They hold the Great Replacement theory. These people that are pro-Israel, that hate Israel, these far right-wingers that hate Israel, that hate Jewish people, also hate all these other groups of people. And that is just the truth. You know, Tucker Carlson, Candace Owens are both spreading conspiracy theories about gay people. And they're obviously both spreading conspiracy theories about Jews. And Nick Fuentes wants all this ethnic cleansing and mass deporting and getting all the non-whites out of here. And that's really, really disgusting. And these people hate Israel to the core, and they hate Jewish people to the core. It's very sad. It's very sad and very sickening in our country. And this is why I continue to make the statement that being pro-Israel and being pro-Jew and being against anti-Semitism is the middle ground. Because the far left is very anti-Semitic and the far right is very anti-Semitic. And they meet in the middle to hate on Israel. And that's just the reality. And by the way, a lot of what they post is a facade, but that's a different subject. Continuing on. So look at Candace Owens, blah, blah, blah. Look at all these groups of people that they hate and demonize, that they teach their Gen Z, mostly male audience to hate and demonize. Hitler started with the Jews, and he persecuted all kinds of marginalized communities. His main target was the Jews. Political opponents, communists, black people, LGBT people, Jehovah's Witnesses, gay people, people with disabilities. I'm going down the list. Slavic people, Roma, Gypsies, Jews, Jehovah's Witnesses. He persecuted everybody that was not part of that Aryan race. Hitler persecuted everybody that was not part of any groups of people that were not part of the special Aryan, blue-eyed, blonde-haired, white race that he wanted so much, straight, white, blue-eyed, blonde-haired race. They went to the concentration camps. And if you really, really want to dig down into it, Nick Fuentes holds those views. I believe Tucker Carlson holds a lot of those views. I know that Kanye West holds a lot of those views. I believe that Candace Owens may hold some of those views herself. And like I said, it always starts with the Jews. It always starts with Jewish conspiracies that are spreading like wildfire to hate Israel, hate the Jews, etc., etc. And the more I see it, the more it just reaffirms my stance. Reaffirms my stance on why I'm going to continue to stand with the Jewish people, with Israel, etc., because the attacks on everybody generally start with the Jews. And I've noticed that. I've noticed that it's noticeable throughout history. So, and by the way, among Gen Z, left and right, especially right, anti-Jewish conspiracies are spreading like wildfire. And I've noticed that too, and I fully condemn those. Hitler started with the Jews. He persecuted all kinds of marginalized communities with them. Leftists, and I mean the far leftists of which I am not part of, which I do not agree with, who meet up in the middle with these folks along the lines of Jew hatred and anti-Semitic beliefs and anti-Israel viewpoints are idiots. By aligning with any Groyper belief, by aligning with Groypers on any of these beliefs, you are going against the very core of our value as Democrats. And that's the truth, because who are Democrats supposed to stand for? Democrats are supposed to stand for equality. We're supposed to stand against all forms of hate. We're supposed to stand against all forms of bigotry, anti-Islamist bigotry, anti-Jew bigotry, anti-Semitism, homophobia, racism, misogyny, xenophobia, fear of immigrants, hate of immigrants. Who are we as Democrats? Well, I'm an independent who leans Democrat. But if we're Democrats, we're supposed to stand against all forms of bigotry, transphobia too, all of them down the line, of which I've mentioned. And I feel like knowing this and continuing to know this continues to reaffirm my beliefs on Israel, on my beliefs on, why I maintain my pro-Israel stance despite constant backlash. And I'm going to be honest with you, this kind of gets back to a point I was making about the higher power, about God. I feel like this is above me on this issue. There's two things in particular that I feel like are above me: this issue and abortion. I've had people all my life, and sex before marriage, but that's not even political. I've had people all my life continue to try to change my views on abortion, on Israel, on Jews, all that stuff, well, abortion and Israel, but especially abortion, actually. I've had people all my life continue to try to change my views. I don't even remember a time, I think abortion is one of the reasons I initially became Republican in the past. Because I grew up a Democrat. I was raised a Democrat, and then I became a Republican on my own in 2013. I was a Republican from 2013 to 2018, and then I was a Democrat from 2018 to 2020 till when I voted for Biden. Then I was a Republican again from 2021 to 2022, and I'm an independent now. I'm an independent because I realized that I can't pretend. It's hard for me to pretend to be part of either party when my views are so independent. Even though I am more likely to vote Democrat today than Republican. That's just the truth. And that's just what it is. Now, Israel and abortion are two things that I genuinely feel like, and I'm going to be honest with you, I genuinely feel like God, the higher power, God, ingrained those views in me because they're unchangeable. Like, all I can do is maybe soften my views a little bit. Maybe say, yes, I recognize that people are it's wrong for men to rape women, lustful men to rape women, etc. And if those women, don't desire to carry that baby, maybe they shouldn't, or whatever, or if it's the life of the mother or incest or whatever, horrible things, then maybe I can soften my views a little bit. But overall, my views are unchangeable, especially, when I was at the Creation Museum and I saw that I don't know how many, I don't even remember, not even like a 5-week-old baby. And it was a whole little tiny human being formed. And I just simply think that abortion is immoral. I simply think that. I simply think that, it's not for me to tell people. I just simply think that abortion is immoral. That's it. I just don't think it's right. I think it's morally wrong. And I've already expressed to you another example of my views on Israel. And why I believe that genuinely that a higher power is kind of like in charge here, in charge of holding my views firm on these issues. And that means that maybe it means that God's got me. Maybe God's got me. And obviously, most issues I very much, when it comes to healthcare and food stamps, Social Security, gun violence, all the immigration, all this stuff, I'm very much liberal on. Very much liberal on, especially on issues related to bigotry and hate and all that stuff. I'm unchangeable on those two. But I wanted to talk a little bit about another issue, kind of open up to you guys a little bit, because I think I've been thinking about this a little bit. And I think I brought this up in another video, with Blair White. And I'm starting to, I have to admit to myself that I can't force myself to hold views that I just don't feel right holding. I'm going to be honest with you. That's the perfect way to put it, actually. I can't force myself to hold views that I just don't feel right holding. Now, when it comes to allowing children to transition, I'm going to be honest with you. When it comes to allowing children to transition, meaning children, young kids, to be put on puberty blockers and become, be put on puberty blockers and transition to the opposite gender. Or if their parents, if their parents affirm them to do that, allow them to do that, or even push them to do that, I think I'm at a point where it's just like that is a little bit of a gray area, because I personally, if I ever had a child, I'm going to be real with you. I'm just kind of putting myself in this perspective, okay? If I ever had a child, hypothetically, if I ever had a child, I don't know if I will ever or not. I don't know. I don't know the future. I don't know the future, but that's neither here or there. If I ever had a child, and that child came to me and said, I want to transition. Let's say I have a son who says, I want to transition into a girl. I personally, despite being liberal on most views, on most issues, I personally would not be able to allow that child. I personally would not have the heart to take that child to a doctor and put him or her on puberty blockers and put him or her on hormones to permanently alter him or her for life. And I think deep down, that comes down to a morality issue. I personally can never do that. If I were put in that position of having to take my child to puberty blockers, or to put my child on puberty blockers, or to put my child through a sex change operation, or to put hormones in my child, I can never do that. I can't. I simply cannot do that. Now, at the same time, if my child were to grow up and ultimately say, this is what I want to do, I am of age now, I am 100% sure I want to do this, then I would just have to respect their decision. But I personally can never approve, would never be able to approve my child going on puberty blockers, or my child going through a sex change surgery or hormone therapy or whatever. I would not be able to stomach that. I would not be able to stomach seeing that happen to them. And I imagine that it must be very hard for parents to see that happen to their kids, especially if their kids are underage and they chose to do it themselves. So right off the back, I can't speak for all liberal parents who wish to affirm their child in their gender identity. But from my own perspective, I can never do that. I would never, ever, ever be able to do that. And I would say to those parents, give them a chance to grow up. Give them a chance to grow up. I'm not going as far as to say, make it illegal, ban all children from, gender affirming care or whatever. I'm not going as far as to say that. But I would personally advise from a moral and from a Christian standpoint to say, give those children a chance to grow up. What they're going through might just be a phase or something like that. What they're going through might just be, maybe they're gay or effeminate or whatever. Maybe they'll grow out of that. Or maybe they'll grow in, maybe they think they're a girl and they're pretending to be a girl wearing dresses, whatever. And eventually they'll grow out of that and be the man or the woman they're supposed to be. Or maybe they won't grow out of that. Maybe as they reach adulthood, they will be 100% certain that they are this way and they want to change their gender, which would be their decision and obviously off my supervision. But like I said, I can't imagine being in the shoes of parents that would say, yes, I'm going to take my child to the doctor or to the gender affirming care or whatever and put my beautiful child, my beautiful son or daughter on puberty blockers and allow them to change their gender or transition. I don't know. It doesn't matter if they're liberal or conservative. Well, conservatives would never. It doesn't matter how liberal they are. I can't imagine being in the parents' shoes that would actually allow a child to do that. and who would sign off on those papers to say, go ahead, put my precious child on gender affirming care or hormone replacement surgery or puberty blockers or hormone pumping machines or whatever. I can't imagine being a parent that would sign off on those papers. And looking at it through that light, it's very, it's honestly chilling to even think what would it be like to be those parents' shoes. And worse, even worse, for a parent to be so embracive that they would happily take their beautiful child and put them on puberty blockers just because they're acting a little effeminate, wearing a dress or whatever, pretending to be the opposite gender, and assume that they're trans just because of that. I think that if it is legal, there should be some heavy restrictions on it. I mean, first of all, I don't know. I really don't know. Maybe, I'm not officially calling for banning it because I'm not in those parents' shoes. I mean, I just don't understand it. And I don't understand why any parent would sign the papers to allow their precious child to go and be on puberty blockers and hormone surgeries and all that stuff. I don't get it. And I really don't agree with it. I don't. And I can't pretend or trick myself into saying that I do. And that's my 2 cents there. I don't know. But on the sense of like, back to what I was saying earlier, it's like maybe that's God speaking through me. Maybe that's God showing me through this in a different light. And kind of like maybe, I don't know. I've never thought about that before until tonight. But this is it. This is where I am. Now, that being said, I continue to stand by my views against transphobia. I'm very against transphobia. It's like at the end of the day, there's plenty of people out there who have already transitioned. We should not show them any bigotry. We should only show them love. We should fight for them, fight for the equality, fight for their civil rights for all adults who have already transitioned. And for all the trans people out there, we need to continue, adult or child, all the trans people out there who have already transitioned, we need to continue to stand with them and to love them and to not hate them and to continue to fight for them. Another reason why I continue to stand more with the Democrats. Like I said, all forms of bigotry have no place in society. And that's my take on it. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. This is just some 2 thoughts here. Thanks for watching. Take care. This is Javier, tuning out.